Taiwan asks people not to target Chinese spouses after 3 of them lose residency over pro-unification comments. Taiwan's courts become a political battleground in a mass recall movement. China unveils a deep-sea cable cutter, claiming it's for research, but recent cuts near Taiwan raise doubts. Plus, meet the litter-picking squad protecting deer in Japan from butts and bottle caps. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council is calling on the public not to go after Chinese spouses living in Taiwan. That's after 3 of these spouses had their residence permits revoked for what Taiwanese authorities say was promoting unification with China by force. Cadence Granta reports.
In recent weeks, 3 Chinese people living in Taiwan have had their residence permits revoked over posts on social media that immigration officials say advocate for the unification of Taiwan and China by force. All 3 became residents by marrying a Taiwanese citizen, something not uncommon in Taiwan, home to around 300,000 Chinese spouses. Their statements have sparked anger and controversy within Taiwan. The Mainland Affairs Council, which manages relations with China, is asking people not to target other Chinese spouses over these comments.
最近好像有一些言论，它就是对整体的陆配新住民做攻击那而且还蔓延到所有跨境通婚的家庭子女等等。我们相信多数的陆配其实是认同台湾这块土地。那我们也希望说，这个不要因为少数人的行为就让多数人被标签化。
Authorities first revoked the Chinese influencer known as Yaya in Taiwan's residency around 2 weeks ago. Then, last week, 2 more Chinese people living in Taiwan had their residency permits canceled after immigration officials concluded that they too had posted social media videos promoting unification by force, pointing to statements they made like, quote, Chinese flags are painted all over the streets in Taiwan. Officials say advocating for unification by force violates regulations governing Chinese citizens living in Taiwan, which say residency can be revoked if they threaten national security or social stability. And they have cited an international convention to justify their decision, which prohibits propaganda for war, something they say does not fall within the bounds of freedom of speech. But one communications expert in Taiwan has questioned a Taipei court's decision to uphold Yaya in Taiwan's punishment, saying the court did not prove that her comments cause a direct and immediate threat to Taiwan's security. Legislators from both the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and opposition Kuomintang have also chimed in.
照理说，来到台湾应该是认同台湾、热爱台湾，那怎么会讲出这样的话呢？所以这让大家也不禁怀疑背后是有特殊的一些政治意图。我想这也涉及到台湾的国家安全，特别这个部分有可能涉及到了中共的认知作战。
现在我们对陆配的执法的标准到底是什么？那是不是武统的言论不可以？但是呢，你虽然不是武统的言论，但是你的讲话我不喜欢，是不是也不可以？
All 3 Chinese people will now have to leave Taiwan. Authorities say they'll continue to investigate reports of other Chinese spouses who may have broken the law, with one eye on how society reacts to the tougher measures. Ryan Wu and Cadence Granta for TaiwanPlus.
Civic groups in Taiwan are scrambling to recall dozens of lawmakers from Taiwan's 2 biggest political parties. As the parties fight for control of the legislature, the country's courts have become a new battleground. Leslie Liao has more.
Recall movements are taking aim at lawmakers from Taiwan's 2 biggest political parties, the Democratic Progressive Party and the Kuomintang. Civic groups are looking to take down legislators from both parties over differences in the country's legislature. The opposition Kuomintang, in coalition with the smaller Taiwan People's Party, holds a slight majority over the ruling DPP in Taiwan's chamber. The impasse has caused deadlocks over everything from the country's judiciary to the annual budget. Taiwan's recall laws require voters to sign petitions to progress past each stage. The KMT has landed itself in legal trouble over recall petition efforts. Last week, authorities in the southern city of Tainan detained representatives from a KMT branch office on suspicion of forgery after carrying out an extensive search. They investigated allegations that some signatures supporting the KMT were fraudulent.
对国民党来说，很显然，国民党伪造文书、抄名册、滥用个资的状况已经离谱到，这个是一目了然的程度。 让检方、让法院都已经去提取了相关的动作。
On the other side, the KMT says a civic group targeting one of their legislators is collecting fraudulent signatures. A group of KMT lawmakers have filed a suit against the civic group, calling on Taipei prosecutors to investigate their petition efforts. The KMT's argument is that the DPP is using its influence as ruling party to manipulate the recalls.
民主国家，除非 这个政党犯了滔天大罪，杀人放火最大恶极，你不会看到有任何这个民主国家的民主政党、执政党，它会有司法的权利，然后去抄家灭族，去搜索在野党部。
The civic group the KMT is targeting says it's followed all relevant laws. These cases are still pending, but it shows just how heated Taiwan's recall movement is getting. With the legislature at stake, both parties are using any means at their disposal to fight. Joseph Wu and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
An unmarked ship with a Chinese crew was intercepted in Taiwan's restricted waters on Sunday. As Chris Goring reports, it's suspected of being part of China's gray zone operations, which have been ramping up in recent months.
No name, no flag, and no home port. That's the status of a suspected Chinese civilian ship detained and under investigation by Taiwan's Coast Guard. The ship, intercepted inside Taiwan's restricted waters on Sunday, had 6 crew members, all of whom are suspected Chinese nationals, but none of them were carrying ID. On the ship was 500,000 liters of fuel, which the Coast Guard suspects was meant for refueling illegal fishing boats in Taiwan's restricted waters. The vessel and crew are now in Taipei Harbor, where the investigation is underway. The incident is part of a slew of recent maritime activity from Chinese government and civilian vessels around Taiwan. The Coast Guard says it's part of China's gray zone strategy aimed at wearing down the country's defenses. That includes multiple instances of Chinese civilian ships cutting Taiwan's underwater internet cables in recent months. And just last week, Chinese Coast Guard vessels were chased out of Taiwan's restricted waters near its outlying Jinmen Islands. When you combine China's frequent military drills with the flurry of recent civilian incidents, it adds up to a lot of pressure on Taiwan's Coast Guard and military. Scott Huang, Ethan Chen, and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
China has unveiled a new kind of deep-sea cable cutter. The South China Morning Post says the device is intended for research, but with several cables recently cut around Taiwan, many are skeptical of China's intentions. For more on this, Hamilton spoke to Jonathan Wolberg. He's the Associate Director of Taiwan Security Monitor, an open-source research initiative at George Mason University.
So what can you tell us about this new kind of cable cutter that China has reportedly unveiled?
So one of the important things to note is that this is actually different than a lot of the other methods that they've used for cable sabotage in the past. And so up until this point, what China's been doing and what everyone's been doing for undersea cable sabotage is using a sort of towed anchor that drags behind a ship that's on the surface. And it looks like an anchor, it kind of goes behind, and as the ship crosses the cable, it hits it and it drags it, and it's what sabotages it. What's different with this is it's actually at a different depth, and this is being attached to a submersible device. It's on a submarine, and it's almost like a chainsaw just attached to a submarine. So this new technology can work at up to 4,000 meters, which is pretty significant, because what it means is that it allows operation further away from the shore.
So in gaining this kind of capability, do you think that we're going to see a more organized or concerted effort from China to find and sabotage Taiwan's undersea cables?
The pattern of incidents here really suggests a deliberate effort. And also, Chinese state media has been talking all about this and showing the abilities. And they're not just talking about the abilities for civilian use. They're talking about its abilities to disrupt cables. Since 2023, Taiwan's experienced numerous undersea cable disruptions. And at Taiwan Security Monitor, the research group that I've been working with, we've been collecting data and tracking incidents of this cable sabotage and actually locating where this has all taken place. And prior to this, a lot of the stuff has taken place in shallow waters, closer to the landing stations. And with the submarine capabilities, we're probably going to see a lot of these newer incidents coming in deeper waters. And the ocean's a pretty big place, even if it's just the Taiwan Strait. And so what's difficult is it's not happening 1 or 2 kilometers away. It's often happening a little bit further out. And the further out you get, the more difficult it becomes to see that, just because you're watching from a very broad view.
So aside from deploying more ships and being more vigilant, what else can Taiwan do to combat these gray zone operations?
And so when there's an incident, be the first party to produce information on it, be the first party to send out articles, to have interviews, to have photos of the ships, because when you allow China to do this, you're giving them the ability to start the story. And it really makes Taiwan look like the boy who cried wolf. Another thing that it does is it gives China more credibility when it takes it away from Taiwan. And so especially when it comes to this narrative warfare, it's really important for Taiwan to be proactive in getting the information and putting it out there before China is able to create their web.
That was Jonathan Wolberg, Associate Director of Taiwan Security Monitor. Taiwan's largest telecom provider, Zhonghua, will help build an undersea cable across the Pacific. It will join an international consortium to establish the E2A system. The over 12,000-kilometer cable will connect major digital hubs in Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and the United States. Zhonghua says the demand for AI and data processing has never been higher, and the project will enhance digital connectivity between Asia and North America. The cable is set to enter service in 2028. 4 people are dead and 6 injured as wildfires rage across South Korea. Since Saturday, nearly 30 wildfires have ignited across the southeast of the country, burning through 63 square kilometers of forest. Over 9,000 emergency workers are battling the fires. Around 1,500 people had to evacuate with the fires damaging homes and a temple. South Korea's government has declared a state of emergency in the affected areas. Turkey has arrested a presidential candidate from the main opposition party, sparking fierce protests across the country. Chelsea Wu has the story.
Huge crowds gather in Istanbul, waving Turkish flags while riot police stand guard. The mayor of Istanbul and potential presidential candidate, Ekrem Imamoglu, has been arrested, triggering Turkey's largest protests in more than a decade.
Bu olanlar tamamen bizim ülkemizin demokrasisine ve hukukuna yapılan tacizler. Hiçbir şekilde hiçbir gücün bunu Türk gençliğine, Türk halkına yapma hakkı yok.
Imamoglu was arrested on charges of corruption and leading a criminal organization. He was among over 100 people, including politicians and journalists, detained last Wednesday in an ongoing investigation, triggering 5 nights of protests. Imamoglu is seen as one of the strongest political opponents to current President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has been in power for 22 years.
İçeri aldılar. Yani karşısına güçlü bir rakip çıktığı sürece hep içeride herkes. Yok etmeye çalışıyorlar. Bu böyle. Yani Türkiye'de şu anda diktatörlük var. Başka bir şey değil.
Imamoglu has denied the criminal charges against him, saying he will not bow down. Under the Turkish constitution, a president can only serve 2 consecutive 5-year terms, meaning that Erdogan cannot run again for the 2028 presidential election unless he changes the constitution. Imamoglu's party, the Republican People's Party, or CHP, has argued that the arrest is a political move to prevent Imamoglu from running.
4 gün içeride tutup Türkiye onun için sandığa giderken onu mahkemeye sevk edip Türkiye onu seçerken onu Silivri zindanına göndererek ona değil milyonlara meydan okumuş, darbe yapmaya kalkmıştır.
The Justice Ministry rejected claims linking Erdogan to the arrests, emphasizing judicial independence. While the Election Council will determine Imamoglu's eligibility to run, President Erdogan has condemned the protests.
CHP ve yandaşlarının tahriklerle kamu düzenini bozmalarına, milletimizin huzurunu kaçırmalarına kesinlikle izin vermeyeceğiz. Türkiye üzerinde operasyon yapılmasına, ameliyat yapılmasına, toplum mühendislikleriyle 85 milyonun arasına yeni nifak duvarları örülmesine müsamaha göstermeyeceğiz.
Since Imamoglu's detention, the Turkish currency, stocks and bonds have plunged, forcing the central bank to intervene to stabilize the lira. Authorities have arrested more than 700 people since the protests began, trying to suppress the growing unrest. As uncertainty looms over Turkey's next presidential election in 2028, fears over the state of its democracy continue to grow. Hank Shi and Chelsea Wu for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, a CEO summit in China draws big names, including the first U.S. politician in Beijing since Trump took office.
Game on Taiwan. The wait is over. Baseball returns as the CPBL kicks off its new season. The UBA and HBL basketball tournaments are heading to their epic final showdown, where the best teams fight for ultimate victory. And the excitement doesn't stop there. Tour de Taiwan is here, with the world's top cyclists pushing their limits through Taiwan's breathtaking landscapes. Game on Taiwan. The action starts here.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Some of the world's most high-profile CEOs are in China for an annual business forum, and among them is the first U.S. politician to visit Beijing since President Donald Trump took office. Joyce Zheng reports.
Top business leaders from around the world gather in Beijing as China looks to recover from drops in foreign investment in a global economy mired in tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. China alone has been hit with a blanket 20% tax by Washington on all its goods, with more possibly to come. Beijing already hitting back with levies of its own. Also at the annual forum, U.S. Senator Steve Daines from Montana, a Trump ally and the first American politician to visit China since Trump retook office. Meeting with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, Beijing's second-in-command told Daines now is the time for the U.S. and China to work together. Daines, who previously spent 6 years in China while at Procter & Gamble, also met with China's top economic official, Vice Premier He Lifeng. In that meeting, Daines' office says the senator urged Beijing to stop the flow of chemicals for the potent opioid fentanyl, a key issue for Washington and a reason behind its steep tariffs.
He'd be in trouble.
Is there any way to know?
Trump is set to detail closely watched reciprocal levies on its trading partners next week, an occasion Trump is calling Liberation Day in America. But the U.S. president has suggested there may be room to negotiate with China.
Well, I'll be speaking to President Xi. I have a great relationship with him. We're going to have a very good relationship. I don't change, but the word flexibility is an important word. Sometimes there's flexibility, so there'll be flexibility, but basically it's reciprocal.
In Beijing, some signs of market confidence from global executives. The head of automaking giant Mercedes-Benz announced over $1.9 billion in new products and technology in China. Others pointed to opportunities in AI, a sensitive technology central to stiff U.S.-China competition.
We have to recognize that the world's economy is in the midst of a massive transformation, which is driven by many aspects. And one of the most important ones might be technology and artificial intelligence in particular.
Some CEOs are expected to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. Meanwhile, the prospects of a higher-level talk between Trump and Xi are still unclear, as Washington's reciprocal tariff launch date quickly approaches. Ethan Pan and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
What would win-win economic cooperation between the U.S. and China look like? For more on Chinese Premier Li Qiang's call to open markets amid what he described as rising instability, Joyce Deng spoke to Daniel Liu, an economist at a Taipei think tank.
In a meeting with U.S. Senator Steve Daines, China's Li Qiang said that the two countries should choose dialogue over confrontation. But given the current climate of Trump's tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, what is the best case scenario for Beijing and Washington right now?
The U.S. and China will. Of course, they will try to engage in the dialogues, or the Xi Jinping may pay a visit to the U.S. to meet Trump. However, but I think the confrontation and the U.S. definitely will impose more tariff on the Chinese product. Also, will impose more export and import restriction on mainland China. I think that is the typical scenario we should anticipate. For Trump's second term, we can see the Trump imposed the tariff not only focus on mainland China, but also apply to other countries which have relatively high trade surplus against the U.S. On April 2nd, he will announce the so-called reciprocal tariff, so-called 30-15. Taiwan may be also on the list. The U.S. trade deficit against mainland China has been reduced significantly. But however, we should also realize that China is still the largest trade deficit country of the U.S.
At the Development Forum, we're also seeing several global CEOs talk about their confidence in business opportunities in the China market. How much has the climate improved for these foreign investors?
Since China launched the U.S. trade war back to the 2018, we can see the flow of the foreign investors to mainland China has decreased. In particular, for the past 2 years, we can see the trend still declining. For the this year China Development Forum, I think one of the major target for mainland China is to try to provide a more suitable investment climate to the foreign large enterprise. But however, I don't see that will generate a significant positive effect. The major reason is China still face very high uncertainty on the penalties from the U.S. But however, we can see China is still the second largest market, only next to the U.S. Mercedes-Benz, the China is the largest auto consumption market in the world. So still, on the one hand, it's still very attractive to the foreigners. But on the other hand, China has to face, very high uncertainty or very high trade sanctions from the U.S. So that is, the two opposite forces,
U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted at some sort of flexibility around his reciprocal tariffs. What does that mean to you?
Well, we can take the Canada and Mexico as the example. He first announced, because of the illegal immigrant problem, U.S. will impose the tariff on Canada and Mexico. And then he will see the improvement, the reaction from the U.S. counterparts. They can make some improvement. Trump may delay or may temporarily suspend the penalty tariff. That is very typical. Trump used the tariff as the bargaining chips or the negotiation weapons.
That was Daniel Liu, a Taipei-based economist from the Zhonghua Institute for Economic Research. The Pope has been discharged from the hospital after 5 weeks of treatment for double pneumonia. Pope Francis made his public appearance before leaving the hospital in Rome. Doctors said the 88-year-old pontiff still needs to rest for 2 months. They have told him to avoid large or stressful meetings, leaving it unclear how much activity he will undertake now he's back at the Vatican. Nara Park in Japan has long been a popular destination for tourists thanks to its iconic Sika deer. But with the litter problem impacting the sacred animals, the park is searching for new ways to keep its furry residents safe. Rosie Greninger has the story.
The hundreds of sacred Sika deer that roam freely through Japan's Nara Park are a major reason the location has become a booming tourist hotspot. But the increasing number of visitors is causing serious health consequences for the animals.
令和元年にですね、たくさんのインバウンドのお客様がいらっしゃったので、その時に、奈良公園に、ゴミが非常に増えたということもあって、当会としてもですね、奈良の鹿がそういう誤ってビニール袋などを食べてですね、体調を崩す。
Tourists are allowed to feed the deer specifically formulated snacks, but some people leave behind cigarette butts and plastic rubbish. The deer sometimes consume these by mistake. The issue has become so bad that plastic waste has caused the death of at least 9 deer.
消化せずに溜まってしまって、消化不良で衰弱してしまうということにもなりかねませんので。
The lack of trash bins doesn't help the situation. The park banned public bins 4 decades ago to stop the deer scavenging in them for food.
We have to carry our trash with us all the time, so I do it, but it's kind of strange for us.
Despite some tourists being on board, it hasn't fixed the issue. The park is trialling a new solar-powered bin that automatically compresses trash. But with the bin project costing a hefty $130,000, local authorities and conservation groups have brought in reinforcements. A litter-picking squad dubbed Beautiful Deer.
我々はポイ捨てのゴミを主に中心に見させてもらうんですけど、本当にいろんなゴミがあります。忘れ物かなというものもありますし。
The team employs people with disabilities who patrol the park daily. Armed with gloves, tongs and dustpans, this squad is looking for stray litter and making Nara Park safe for the sacred deer who roam it. James Lin and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we take you to Cuba for Las Parrandas, a traditional festival with carnival-like celebrations dating back to the early 19th century. I'm Betty Chen. Take care and see you next time.